Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, September 1944. Erika Weber, a German prisoner, stood at the barracks window of the female compound, watching with a mix of disbelief and curiosity as American soldiers moved through training exercises on the field. To her, it seemed like a chaotic mess of military errors. The American troops performed their drills with a laid-back efficiency that bore no resemblance to the rigid precision of the Wehrmacht training she had known. "Look at them," she remarked, to Oberfeldwebel Monica Brown, gesturing toward the American soldiers. No synchronization, no discipline. They looked like farmers pretending to be soldiers. Monica joined her at the window, assessing the scene through the eyes of someone with 8 years of experience in German signals intelligence. "Their formations are a joke," she said. "In the Wehrmacht, they'd be punished for such sloppiness." The 42 German female prisoners at Fort Leavenworth came from various military specialties: communications officers, medical personnel, administrative staff, most of them captured during the Normandy campaign. They were all indoctrinated with the belief that the Wehrmacht was far superior to the Allied forces, and Erika herself had internalized this idea. "The Americans win through their industrial capacity," Erika continued, repeating propaganda she had long been taught. "Not through superior soldiers or training. Look at their movements. No coordination, no precision. A German soldier would perform those same maneuvers with flawless unity." Through the fence, they watched American infantry practice squad tactics in a wooded area. The soldiers moved independently, relying on hand signals and making decisions based on the terrain and tactical needs. To Erika, it appeared disorganized, inefficient, nothing like the disciplined formations of the Wehrmacht. "Miss Weber?" called Sergeant Anderson from the barracks entrance, using the formal address typically reserved for enemy prisoners. "Colonel Morrison requests your presence in the administration building. He wants to discuss the prisoner work program." As Erika walked across the compound toward the meeting, she passed close to the training field and overheard American drill, instructors guiding their troops through combat scenarios. The focus of their training seemed to emphasize initiative, adaptability, and problem-solving, rather than the rote memorization and synchronized precision Erika had come to associate with proper military discipline. "Terrible methodology," she muttered under her breath. "No wonder they relied on overwhelming material advantage to defeat us." Colonel Morrison's office overlooked the training facility, and through his windows, Erika could see several exercises in progress. Physical drills, weapons practice, tactical simulations, all conducted with the same casual efficiency that to her looked unprofessional and sloppy. "Miss Weber," Colonel Morrison began once she was seated, "we're launching a new program that allows exemplary prisoners to observe American military training. The aim is cultural exchange, to show that while our methods are different, they are effective in their own right." Erika raised an eyebrow. "You want us to watch your training?" she asked, her skepticism evident. "It's clear they lack the discipline and precision that are the hallmarks of proper military excellence." Morrison's expression remained neutral, though his eyes hinted that he had encountered this attitude before. "I want you to observe with an open mind and base your conclusions on what you actually see, not on assumptions. You might be surprised by what you learn." The proposal seemed absurd, enemy prisoners critiquing the training of their captors, but Erika's background in intelligence made her curious. Even if she already expected to confirm her beliefs about the superiority of German military training, she agreed to observe. "I'll observe," she said, "though I expect my conclusions will support what I already know about the comparative quality of our armies." Morrison smiled faintly. "Then you have nothing to lose by watching carefully. The observations begin tomorrow at 600 hours. Later, when Erika shared the news with the other prisoners, their reactions ranged from curiosity to derision. But All of them, like her, believed that the Wehrmacht's military training was the epitome of excellence, and that American methods were a poor substitute, bolstered only by industrial power. Tomorrow, she would observe their training and document its shortcomings, confident that her intelligence reports would once again prove German superiority. She had no idea that what she was about to witness would shatter every assumption she had about military effectiveness, training philosophy, and the connection between discipline and combat success. The pre-dawn darkness had barely begun to lift when Sergeant Anderson led Erika and 5 other German prisoners to an observation area overlooking the main training facility. They had been given notebooks and instructed to record anything that caught their attention about the American military methods, a request that struck Erika as either overly confident or terribly misguided. "The unit you'll observe today is completing advanced infantry training," Anderson explained in careful German. "These soldiers will deploy to the Pacific Theater in 6 weeks. Watch carefully and ask if you have any questions about what you're seeing." As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Erika watched in surprise as American soldiers assembled with surprising efficiency, nothing like the disorganization she had anticipated. This was not the rigid parade ground style she associated with proper military discipline. The soldiers' formation was far from what Erika had expected from military drills, but it still reflected a purposeful organization. The men seemed to understand their roles instinctively without needing constant supervision. Captain Williams, the training officer overseeing the exercise, joined their group and asked, "Notice anything unusual?" "They're not standing at attention," Erika noted, her voice tinged with surprise. "In the Wehrmacht, soldiers maintain a rigid posture during formation." Williams smiled. "They're comfortable. We don't waste energy on parade ground formality during field training. These soldiers know why they're here and what's expected of them. Discipline isn't enforced through rigid posture, it's built into their understanding of purpose." To Erika, the distinction felt semantic, but she dutifully made notes about the American approach to formation discipline. The real surprises began when the training exercises started. The first drill involved squad-level tactical movement through uneven terrain. Rather than moving in synchronized formations, American soldiers advanced independently, adjusting their movements based on terrain features while still maintaining squad cohesion. To Erika, it looked disorganized, but she had to admit the squad covered ground quickly and worked well together, supporting one another along the way. "Why don't they move together?" Monica asked, voicing the question that lingered on the minds of all the German observers. "In Wehrmacht training, squad members advance in coordinated formation. Because terrain isn't uniform," Williams explained. "Rigid formation movement might look impressive on parade grounds, but it's tactically inefficient in combat. We train our soldiers to think independently while maintaining squad cohesion. Each man makes decisions based on the tactical situation." The response left Erika with a sense of disbelief, but she couldn't deny that the approach seemed to work. Over the next hour, Erika watched American training that defied her previous assumptions about military discipline. Soldiers were encouraged to question orders if they appeared tactically unsound. Junior enlisted men made independent decisions during simulated combat, and the focus was on problem-solving rather than blind obedience. "This would never work in the Wehrmacht," Erika remarked to Williams during a break. "German military excellence comes from perfect obedience to orders, synchronized execution, and respect for command authority." "And how did that work out?" Williams replied, gesturing toward the German prisoners observing the training. "Your army prioritized obedience over initiative. Ours focuses on mission accomplishment over rigid procedure. You're here as prisoners, while our soldiers are preparing for their next deployment. Those outcomes suggest something about the effectiveness of the training." Erika felt the sting of his words more than she wanted to admit. She had been captured, because her Wehrmacht unit continued to follow outdated orders in rapidly changing tactical situations. The rigid obedience she had once praised had directly contributed to her unit's destruction and capture. "Tomorrow," Williams continued, "you'll observe advanced tactics training, where soldiers plan and execute complex operations with minimal officer supervision. I think you'll find it enlightening." As Erika returned to the compound, her mind was filled with uncomfortable questions. The American training seemed casual and undisciplined, yet it produced soldiers capable of executing complex, independent operations. Meanwhile, Wehrmacht training emphasized synchronized precision and strict obedience, yet it had led to Germany's defeat. Could she have been wrong about what made for superior military training? The thought felt almost treasonous, but the evidence was beginning to mount in ways her intelligence background couldn't simply ignore. On day 2 of the training observations, Erika witnessed advanced tactical exercises. American soldiers were tasked with planning and executing simulated combat operations with a level of independence that would have been unthinkable in the Wehrmacht's rigid structure. Erika watched as a squad of 8 enlisted men, with no officers present, analyzed a tactical problem, developed a solution, and carried it out with coordinated efficiency. The movements weren't synchronized like in the German method, but the squad still achieved their objectives effectively. "Where are the officers?" asked Lieutenant Bergman, a former Luftwaffe communications officer who had joined the group. "Who's commanding this operation?" "Sergeant Hayes is the squad leader," Captain Williams explained, pointing to an experienced NCO who was consulting with his team rather than issuing orders. In the American military structure, sergeants lead small unit operations. Officers provide strategic direction, but we trust our sergeants to handle tactical execution. "You let enlisted men make command decisions?" Erika asked in disbelief. "In the Wehrmacht, the officer corps maintains strict hierarchical control. Enlisted men execute orders without question or initiative. We don't just let them, we require it," Williams replied. "Combat is chaotic. Communications fail. Officers can become casualties. Situations change faster than commands can be relayed. We train every soldier to think independently and make tactical decisions. That way, even when command structure is disrupted, our units maintain effectiveness." As the exercise progressed, Erika began to understand what Williams meant. The American squad encountered an unexpected obstacle, a position held by an enemy force, and responded without hesitation. The lack of centralized command didn't seem to hinder their ability to adapt and execute their mission effectively. The American squad responded to an unanticipated obstacle with impressive speed, adapting their tactics on the spot without waiting for higher authority. They communicated effectively, adjusted positions, and executed modified strategies that neutralized the threat within 4 minutes. Erika, reluctantly acknowledging the efficiency, thought, in the Wehrmacht, encountering an unexpected situation would require reporting the change and awaiting new orders. "How long would that take?" Williams asked, breaking into her thoughts. 15 to 30 minutes, depending on communication and command availability," Erika replied. Her voice tinged with the realization of the time it would cost. "And in combat, that's often too long," Williams continued. "By the time those new orders arrive, the situation could have already changed again." He gestured to the American squad, now consolidating their position after the exercise. "We train soldiers to solve problems in real time, because that's what combat demands. Your Wehrmacht training produces excellent obedience. Ours produces effective problem solving." Over the following week, Erika and the other German prisoners observed training that constantly challenged their views on military excellence. Physical fitness focused on functional strength and endurance, not ceremonial appearances. American soldiers, who didn't look as polished as their Wehrmacht counterparts, demonstrated superior stamina during sustained operations. Weapons training was built on understanding mechanical principles rather than rote procedures, which meant American soldiers could maintain and repair their equipment in the field, something Wehrmacht. Soldiers would require specialists to do leadership training at every level emphasized initiative and problem-solving. Even privates were taught small unit tactics because American doctrine assumed that every soldier might need to lead at some point. This is a completely different philosophy, Monica remarked during one of their evening discussions. Wehrmacht training treats soldiers like parts in a machine, functioning through perfect synchronization. American training treats soldiers as independent operators who coordinate toward common goals. And which philosophy produces better combat results? Lieutenant Bergman asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Everyone knew the answer but was hesitant to say it out loud. Erika had been keeping detailed notes on American training, originally intending to highlight its flaws for future intelligence reports. But as the observations piled up, her notes began to reflect a growing comparison between American and German methods, forcing her to question everything she had believed about military training. After one particularly revealing session, Erika approached Captain Williams with a personal question. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course," he replied. "Did you design your training to counter German methods specifically, or was this developed independently?" Erika inquired. Williams thought for a moment before answering. "American military training evolved from our national character and combat experience. We're a nation built on individual initiative and democratic principles, and our military reflects those values. We trust soldiers to think for themselves because that's how Americans naturally approach problems. It happens to be effective against armies built on rigid hierarchy and obedience. But that's almost incidental. So you're saying American military effectiveness is more about cultural values than deliberate tactical design?" Erika pressed. "I'm saying our training works because it's authentic to who we are as a society," Williams explained. "You can't just import another nation's military methods without importing the cultural values that make those methods work. Wehrmacht training produces perfect obedience because German culture values hierarchy and authority. American training produces initiative and problem-solving because those are the qualities we admire in our citizens." Erika felt uncomfortable with the resonance of his words. She had assumed American training was just an inferior version of German methods, but Williams had made her realize that they were fundamentally different, based on different values. Perhaps those American values led to more adaptable soldiers. 2 weeks into the observation program, Colonel Morrison invited Erika to attend officer development courses, where American lieutenants and captains were being taught leadership concepts that seemed to directly contradict everything she had learned at Wehrmacht officer school. Major Patterson, who was leading a leadership seminar Erika was allowed to observe, explained, "The primary role of an American officer is to develop capable subordinates who can function independently. Your success as a leader is measured not by how well your soldiers obey orders, but by how effectively they accomplish missions when you're not present." The concept was revolutionary to Erika. In Wehrmacht officer training, success meant maintaining absolute control and ensuring the perfect execution of commands. The idea that officers should focus on developing subordinate independence felt like a complete abdication of command responsibility. What happens when soldiers disagree with orders? Erika asked during the question period, taking advantage of Morrison's permission to participate. "It depends on the situation," Patterson responded. "In combat, orders are followed immediately, and any discussion happens afterward if time allows. But during planning and training, we encourage soldiers to question orders. They don't understand or believe they're flawed. Some of our best tactical innovations came from enlisted men or junior officers who saw better approaches than senior commanders initially recognized." "But that undermines command authority," Erika protested. "Military effectiveness requires hierarchical discipline and unquestioned obedience." "Does it?" Patterson asked mildly. "You're a captured Wehrmacht officer, Miss Weber. Your army emphasized hierarchical discipline and unquestioned obedience. How well did that serve Germany's military effectiveness? The question was blunt but not hostile. It was delivered with the directness that seemed to characterize the American way of speaking, which Erika had grown unaccustomed to. She had no good response. The evidence was undeniable. German military training had produced soldiers who obeyed orders perfectly, but those orders were often flawed, leading to strategic failures that individual initiative could have avoided. "I've been thinking about your observations," Colonel Morrison said to her after the seminar ended. "You've been taking detailed notes about American training methods. Would you be willing to share your analysis? Not for intelligence purposes. The war is effectively over, and this information isn't classified, but I'm curious about how a Wehrmacht officer perceives our approach to military training." Erika hesitated, then agreed. Over the next week, she compiled her observations into a comprehensive report comparing American and Wehrmacht training philosophies. The process forced her to articulate conclusions she had long avoided. American training produced soldiers who adapted to unexpected situations. Wehrmacht training produced soldiers who executed known procedures perfectly, but struggled when situations deviated from the plan. American command structures distributed decision-making authority broadly, while the Wehrmacht concentrated it at higher levels, creating bottlenecks when rapid decisions were needed. American military culture valued mission accomplishment over procedural correctness, while Wehrmacht culture prioritized procedural correctness over improvisation, even when circumstances required adaptation. "This is excellent analysis," Morrison said after reviewing her report. "You've identified key differences between our military cultures. But I notice you've avoided the most important question: which approach is more effective? You've described differences, but not made judgments about their relative merit." Erika stared at her report, recognizing that Morrison was right. She had detailed differences without drawing the obvious conclusion her own experience had proven. The American approach had defeated the Wehrmacht. Despite Germany's initial advantages in experience, equipment, and tactical doctrine, the American approach is more effective, she said finally. The admission both painful and undeniable. That's a difficult conclusion for a Wehrmacht officer to reach, Morrison observed sympathetically. "It's an impossible conclusion," Erika replied, the words bitter on her tongue. "But evidence doesn't care about my preferences or national pride. I've watched your training for 3 weeks, and I've seen American soldiers accomplish with initiative and adaptability what Wehrmacht soldiers couldn't achieve through perfect obedience. The comparison isn't flattering to German military culture, but denying it doesn't change reality." Morrison studied her thoughtfully. "Miss Weber, would you be interested in helping us develop training materials for post-war German reconstruction? Your understanding of both Wehrmacht and American military cultures makes you valuable in creating educational programs that help Germans understand alternative approaches to military organization." The offer surprised Erika, but she recognized its wisdom. If Germany were to rebuild effectively, it would need to learn from the societies that had succeeded where German methods had failed. That learning, she realized, would be more impactful coming from Germans who could bridge both cultures, rather than Americans imposing foreign concepts. "I'll help," she said, "but I want to be honest about what I'm doing, not pretending American methods are perfect, but explaining why they're effective and how they might be adapted to post-war German needs." "That's exactly what we need," Morrison replied. "Honest analysis that respects both cultures, while recognizing that military training should be judged by combat effectiveness rather than parade ground appearance." Indeed, by November 1944, Germany's military situation was growing increasingly desperate. Among the prisoners, there was a rising realization that Wehrmacht superiority had been little more than propaganda. For Erika, the observations had crystallized into a painful understanding. German military culture had prioritized the wrong things: appearance over effectiveness, obedience over initiative, and rigid procedure over adaptive problem-solving. "I've been asked to give a presentation," Erika told the gathered German prisoners during one of their evening discussions. "I'll explain what we've learned from observing American military training. Colonel Morrison wants me to share our observations with other prisoner groups and eventually to develop educational programs." The announcement about Erika's involvement in developing post-war training materials for Germany's military was met with mixed reactions. Some prisoners saw it as collaboration with the enemy, while others viewed it as a practical step toward post-war reconstruction. Monica represented the pragmatic view. "We lost the war partly because we believed our own propaganda about military superiority. If Erika's observations help future Germans avoid similar mistakes, that's valuable service to our country." Over the next month, Erika delivered presentations to multiple prisoner groups, consistently emphasizing the same themes. American military training worked because it aligned with American cultural values. German training had failed because it prioritized the wrong attributes. Post-war German military reform, she argued, needed to learn from Allied successes without merely copying foreign methods. "The key lesson," she explained during one presentation, "isn't that American methods are superior in absolute terms. It's that effective military training must match the society it serves. Americans train for initiative because their culture values individual problem-solving. Germans train for obedience because our culture values hierarchical authority. In modern combat, initiative has proven more valuable than obedience." One listener, a former Panzer officer still clinging to Wehrmacht ideals, challenged her. "So you're saying German culture is inferior?" Erika replied carefully. "I'm saying German military culture made choices that proved ineffective in modern warfare. That's not the same as claiming cultural inferiority. But it does mean we need to honestly assess what worked and what didn't, rather than holding on to comfortable myths about superiority." As 1944 came to a close and Allied victory became inevitable, American authorities began implementing cultural education programs for prisoners who would help rebuild Germany. Erika found herself at the center of these efforts, developing training materials, comparing military philosophies, and explaining why American approaches had proven effective. "You've become quite influential," Captain Williams remarked during one of their regular meetings. "Prisoners respect your Wehrmacht credentials, but they also trust your analysis of American methods. That combination makes you valuable for bridging cultures." "I'm just being honest about what I've observed," Erika responded. "American training works because it produces soldiers who can think independently while maintaining unit cohesion. Wehrmacht training failed because it produced soldiers who could only function under direct command, authority. Those are factual observations, not value judgments about national character," Williams pointed out. "But they are value judgments about military effectiveness. And those judgments challenge German mythology about Wehrmacht superiority, which is exactly why they need to be stated," Erika said firmly. "Germany lost the war partly because we believed our own propaganda. If my observations help future Germans recognize that military effectiveness requires adaptability over rigid obedience, that's worth whatever criticism I receive from people still clinging to defeated ideologies." By January 1945, as Germany's final collapse accelerated, Erika received a formal assignment to the post-war military education program. She would remain in American custody, but work as a civilian educator rather than a prisoner, teaching German civilians and military personnel about alternative approaches to military organization and training. "Your assignment will likely extend several years," Morrison explained. "Post-war German reconstruction will require extensive re-education about military culture and civil-military relations. Your unique perspective as a Wehrmacht officer who understands both German and American approaches makes you invaluable for that work." "I understand," Erika replied. "And I'm ready to serve, even if some Germans consider me a traitor for acknowledging that American military training proved superior to Wehrmacht methods." "You're not acknowledging superiority," Morrison corrected. You're acknowledging effectiveness. There's an important difference. American methods worked in the American context with American soldiers. The lesson for Germany isn't to copy America, but to develop training approaches that value initiative and problem-solving while remaining authentically German. As winter deepened and the war's end neared, Erika reflected on how completely her understanding had changed. 3 months ago, she had stood at a barracks window, mocking American soldiers for their lack of Wehrmacht precision. Now she understood that precision itself had been the problem, rigid adherence to procedure when flexibility was needed. The American soldiers she had once dismissed as undisciplined were actually highly trained professionals whose casual efficiency reflected confidence, not sloppiness. Their training emphasized attributes that mattered in combat: initiative, problem-solving, adaptability, and mission focus. Wehrmacht training, by contrast, had emphasized attributes that looked impressive on parade grounds but were less valuable in real warfare: synchronized movements, unquestioning obedience, and rigid adherence to procedure. "Our men were not superior," she wrote in her journal that night. "We were trained to value the wrong things." And it took becoming a prisoner and watching enemy soldiers trained to understand that military excellence isn't measured by parade ground precision, but by combat effectiveness. That's the lesson I'll spend the next years teaching to Germans who need to understand that admitting past mistakes is the first step toward building better futures. By March 1945, as Germany's collapse accelerated and the war in Europe came to an end, Erika's journey from enemy prisoner to educator for post-war reconstruction had solidified her role as a bridge between two military cultures. One she had once believed was superior, and the other she had once dismissed as inferior. For Erika, this marked the beginning of a new mission. Her transition from prisoner to educator was formalized with civilian employment contracts from the U.S. Army's Military Government Division, tasked with developing training programs for post-war German reconstruction. "Your first assignment," explained Colonel Morrison, now overseeing occupation planning, "is creating educational materials that explain American military training philosophy to German officers who will help rebuild their country's defense forces under Allied supervision." Erika understood the challenge immediately. Former Wehrmacht officers would resist lessons from victorious enemies, especially when those lessons contradicted their deeply held beliefs about German military superiority. She would need to present American methods not as superior alternatives, but as effective approaches worthy of study and adaptation. "I want to emphasize comparative analysis," she told Morrison during their planning sessions. "Not that American methods are better, but here's what Americans do differently and why it works for them. Let German officers draw their own conclusions from evidence, not feel lectured about their failures." This approach proved effective when she began teaching her first classes in occupied Munich. Former Wehrmacht officers arrived skeptical and defensive, but Erika's credentials — she was a decorated communications officer who had commanded respect in the German military — gave her a credibility that American instructors couldn't match. "I stood where you're standing now," she told her first class of 40 German officers. "I watched American training and thought it looked undisciplined and inferior. But I forced myself to observe carefully and question my assumptions. What I learned challenged everything I believed about military excellence." She walked them through the same observations she had made at Fort Leavenworth. The American emphasis on initiative over obedience, distributed decision-making rather than centralized control, and mission focus instead of procedural rigidity. Each point was illustrated with specific examples, comparing Wehrmacht and American approaches. "Consider a simple scenario," she proposed. "A squad encounters an unexpected enemy position during an advance. Wehrmacht training says report to command. Await new orders. Execute a modified plan. American training says squad leader assesses the situation, makes an immediate tactical decision, adapts without waiting for higher authority. Which approach is more effective in fluid combat?" Wehrmacht approach maintains command control, argued Major Hoffmann, a former panzer officer still loyal to traditional German military doctrine. Without central coordination, units operate independently and lose overall strategic coherence. Does maintaining control matter if it means losing tactical opportunities? Erika countered. The Americans defeated us partly because their soldiers could adapt faster than our command structure could issue new orders. We valued control over effectiveness, and we paid the price for that choice. The discussions were heated but productive. Former Wehrmacht officers began to wrestle with uncomfortable truths about military effectiveness, gradually recognizing that Germany's defeat hadn't come from a lack of courage or inferior soldiers, but from a training philosophy that prioritized the wrong attributes for modern warfare. "You're making them question everything," observed Captain Williams, who'd been transferred to occupation duty and occasionally attended Erika's classes. "That's uncomfortable but necessary." "It's what I had to do," Erika replied. "Question everything I thought I knew about military excellence. If they're willing to undergo the same process, we can build something better than what failed so catastrophically." Over the following months, Erika's reputation grew among both occupation authorities and German military personnel. She became known as the Wehrmacht officer, who could honestly assess Germany's failures without losing respect for the German soldiers, who could explain American success without claiming Americans were inherently superior. The key, she explained during one particularly successful class, was recognizing that military training must align with national culture and combat realities. Americans trained for initiative because their culture valued individual problem-solving. Germans trained for obedience because our culture valued hierarchy. Neither is inherently right or wrong, but in modern warfare, adaptability proved more valuable than rigid procedure. That's the lesson we need to internalize. As 1945 ended and occupation deepened, Erika's work expanded beyond military training to broader questions about civil-military relations and democratic governance. But her core message remained consistent. An honest assessment of past failures was essential for building better futures, and learning from former enemies required setting aside pride to acknowledge what they had done more effectively. Winter 1946 brought new challenges as Cold War tensions emerged, and American authorities recognized that German military reconstruction would need to counter Soviet influence rather than simply prevent German rearmament. Erika found herself at the center of debates about how to build new German defense forces that could learn from Wehrmacht failures while avoiding complete Americanization. "We need German officers who think independently but operate within a democratic framework," explained General Matthews, the senior American officer overseeing military reconstruction planning. "Your training programs need to prepare them for that balance, initiative and problem-solving, without the authoritarianism that characterized the Wehrmacht." The task was delicate. Too much emphasis on American methods would create resistance from German officers who viewed it as cultural imperialism. Too little would risk recreating the rigid hierarchy that had led to Wehrmacht failures. Erika worked to find a middle ground that respected German military traditions while incorporating lessons from American effectiveness. "I've been developing a concept I call mission-type tactics with democratic accountability," she explained during a presentation to senior American and German officials. "It combines the German military tradition of Auftragstactic mission-type orders that give subordinates freedom to accomplish objectives with the American emphasis on initiative and democratic civilian control." The concept resonated with both audiences. German officers appreciated the references to traditional Auftragstaktik doctrine, which had emphasized subordinate initiative before being corrupted by Nazi-era authoritarianism. American officials valued the democratic accountability framework that would ensure military independence, didn't threaten civilian governance. "This is an excellent synthesis," commented Brigadier General Weber, no relation, a former Wehrmacht officer now working with occupation authorities. You've taken the best of both traditions and created something that might actually work for post-war Germany, but implementation proved challenging. Former Wehrmacht officers struggled to abandon ingrained habits of rigid hierarchy. Younger Germans, disillusioned by Nazi-era militarism, resisted any military training that seemed authoritarian. Erika found herself constantly adapting her approach to different audiences, always emphasizing the same core message. Effective military training requires balancing discipline with initiative, order with adaptability. Some days I feel like I'm trying to teach cats to swim, she confided to Monica, who had joined her educational staff after proving equally effective at bridging German and American military cultures. Wehrmacht veterans want to maintain rigid hierarchy. Young Germans reject anything that reminds them of Nazi militarism. Finding middle ground that satisfies both is nearly impossible, but necessary. Germany needs military forces that can defend democracy without threatening it, Monica replied. That requires exactly the balance you're trying to teach. Discipline without authoritarianism, initiative without chaos. By late 1946, Erika's training programs had educated over 500 former Wehrmacht officers in new approaches to military leadership. Feedback suggested the programs were effective, with participants reporting valuable insights into why American military methods worked and how similar principles might be adapted to German contexts. Your work has been influential beyond what we initially hoped, Morrison told her during a review meeting. Multiple Allied nations are requesting copies of your training materials for their own occupation zones. You've become the primary voice explaining how to reform German military culture without destroying what was valuable in German military traditions. The recognition was gratifying, but also overwhelming. Erika had started this journey as a prisoner, mocking American training. Now she was an internationally recognized expert on military cultural reform. The transformation felt surreal, yet it reflected the broader changes Germany itself was undergoing. From defeated enemy to potential ally, from authoritarian militarism to democratic governance. I'm just being honest about what I observed, she replied to Morrison's praise. American training worked because it aligned with American values and combat realities. German training failed because it prioritized appearance over effectiveness. The lesson isn't complicated. Militaries succeed when training matches cultural values and tactical requirements. Germany's challenge is developing training that serves democratic values while maintaining military effectiveness. As 1946 ended, Erika received a formal appointment as senior consultant to the Allied High Commission's Military Training Division, a position that would shape German military reconstruction for years to come. The former Wehrmacht officer who'd once mocked American soldiers had become the architect of a new German military culture, partly based on lessons learned from those same American soldiers she had once dismissed as inferior. In the summer of 1955, 10 years after the war's end, Erika stood in the newly established Bundeswehr training facility near Munich, watching the first generation of post-war German soldiers conduct exercises that blended German military traditions with lessons learned from American effectiveness. The young soldiers moved with purpose and discipline, but their training emphasized initiative and problem-solving rather than rigid obedience. Impressive, commented General Taylor, visiting from U.S. Army headquarters to observe the training Erika had helped design. They look professional and disciplined, but you can see the difference from the old Wehrmacht style. These soldiers are being trained to think, not just obey. That was always the goal, Erika replied, watching a squad leader make an independent tactical decision during a training scenario. Create military forces that combine German tradition with American lessons about adaptability and initiative. It's taken a decade, but I think we're finally achieving that balance. The Bundeswehr training program represented everything Erika had learned since that morning in 1944, when she had stood at a barracks window, Watching American soldiers she once mocked. The new German military emphasized democratic values, civilian control, and individual initiative while maintaining the discipline and professional standards that German military tradition valued. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Monica, now a senior training administrator who had accompanied Erika to observe the graduation exercises. After spending 10 years teaching Germans to adopt methods Erika had once mocked. "Never," Erika replied firmly. "I regret the years I wasted believing Wehrmacht propaganda about our superiority, but I don't regret the decade I've spent helping Germany learn from its mistakes." The graduation ceremony that afternoon featured addresses from both German and Allied officials, all emphasizing the same themes: democratic values, military professionalism, and the importance of learning from past failures. When Erika was called to the stage to receive recognition for her contributions to military reconstruction, she felt an overwhelming emotion at how far Germany had come. 10 years ago, she told the assembled soldiers and officials, "I was a Wehrmacht officer who believed German military training was superior to anything our enemies could produce. I mocked American soldiers because they didn't move with parade ground precision, because they questioned orders, because they valued initiative over obedience." She paused, looking out at the young German soldiers who had grown up in a very different Germany than the one she had served. It took becoming a prisoner and watching American training with open eyes to understand that I had been wrong about what constituted military excellence. Wehrmacht training produced soldiers who looked impressive on parade grounds but struggled when combat required adaptation. American training produced soldiers who looked casual but proved devastatingly effective when circumstances demanded independent problem-solving. The lesson I learned, the lesson I've spent 10 years teaching, is that effective military training must serve actual combat requirements rather than satisfying our aesthetic preferences for synchronized movements and unquestioning obedience. Modern warfare rewards initiative, adaptability, and distributed decision-making. The Bundeswehr you're joining has been built on those principles, combining the best of German military tradition with lessons learned from studying why our enemies succeeded, where we failed. As the ceremony concluded, and the young soldiers dispersed to their first assignments, Erika reflected on the improbable journey from prisoner to architect of German military reconstruction. The transformation had required setting aside pride, acknowledging painful truths, and recognizing that learning from former enemies was patriotic service rather than betrayal. "Any final thoughts?" asked Colonel Morrison, who had traveled from Washington to attend the ceremony. He had become a friend over the years, someone who understood both the difficulty and importance of the work Erika had undertaken. "Just gratitude," Erika replied. Watching Bundeswehr soldiers conduct themselves with professional discipline that honored German traditions while embracing democratic values. Gratitude that I was captured by people generous enough to teach rather than simply punish. That I was forced to observe training that challenged my assumptions. And that I had the opportunity to help build something better than what failed so catastrophically. As evening approached and the ceremonies concluded, Erika took a final walk through the training facility that represented a decade of work and transformation. The young German soldiers she passed looked confident and capable, trained in methods that would have been revolutionary in Wehrmacht culture, but had become the norm in democratic German military service. "Our men were never superior," she murmured, remembering her arrogant declarations from that first day at Fort Leavenworth. "We just believed our own propaganda and paid a terrible price for that self-deception." The real superiority came from Americans who were secure enough in their methods to let enemy prisoners observe them carefully, confident that honest observation would reveal their effectiveness. The greatest victory, she'd learned, wasn't military conquest, but the transformation of understanding that came from setting aside prejudice long enough to recognize that former enemies might have valuable lessons to teach. And the strongest military forces were those that valued effectiveness over appearance, substance over ceremony, and the courage to admit when cherished beliefs had proven wrong. As she drove away from the training facility toward her home in Munich, Erika felt pride in what German military reconstruction had achieved. Not because it had copied American methods, but because it had learned from American success while creating something authentically German and genuinely democratic, a military that could defend without threatening, that valued initiative without abandoning discipline, and that recognized that true excellence comes from adaptability rather than rigid adherence to procedure. The American soldiers she'd once mocked had taught her the most valuable lesson of all. Strength doesn't come from never being wrong, but from having the courage to recognize mistakes and learn from those who succeeded where you failed.